How does this happen in terms of documentation? Well, you have to have a joint venture agreement that defines, who gets paid what. And so in this JV agreement, it's a JV agreement for the singular property. It's a one pager that says, the two parties, our entity and our funnel client, Ralph, we're going to split this wholesale fee 50-50. And that in essence is, what a joint venture deal is. Okay. Any questions on that? Feel free to ask your questions. I'll answer those questions as we go through again schematically, how to make a joint venture wholesaling deal work. Now, sometimes you'll have the buyer and sometimes you'll have the seller in terms of who you bring to the table. Which is worth more, the buyer or the seller? Well, it really depends. A lot of times people will, if you do a joint venture deal, a lot of times people will just split 50-50, but not always. It depends. Sometimes you have a property under contract, so you have the seller locked into the contract with the seller, and the market is such where you can find a buyer, and there's so many buyers out there. Maybe it isn't a 50-50 split. Maybe you give away a flat finder's fee for a buyer's finder's fee. Maybe you have a buyer who is buying properties in bulk, and the buyer is maybe a unicorn. Maybe the buyer's buying all cash, and you feel as though if someone brings you a property that meets your buyer's criteria, that 50-50 split on the wholesale fee isn't what you're willing to give. Maybe you're only willing to give a flat finder's fee for a seller. So it really just depends on the marketplace. It depends on the situations. It really is case by case, but a lot of times people will split wholesale fees 50-50, depending on the value of what each other is bringing to the table. But it's nothing set in stone that has to be split 50-50. Again, depending on a scenario of supply, demand of the buyer and the seller, depending on market conditions, there may be a scenario where you just decide to agree on a flat fee as a buyer's finder's fee or a seller's finder's fee, depending on what you are bringing to the table with the joint venture. But ultimately, just to summarize it again, for those just joining us, this is Andre Johnson here for Ideal Finders Call. Today's training topic is joint venture wholesaling. So we just spent the last 5 or so minutes talking about, what is a joint venture wholesaling deal. Just spent time talking about how to make it happen in terms of the documentation, in terms of how you actually get paid on the HUD-1. And just to reiterate here, this is essentially what wholesaling is. And then joint venture wholesaling is having collaboration between the wholesaler and another party to get help with putting together the motivated seller and the wholesale buyer. So wholesaling in essence is, again, connecting a motivated seller A to a wholesale buyer C, with you, the wholesaler B, being in between. Now, when you have only one of those parties, the property under contract, the motivated seller, or maybe you have a pre-qualified, active and ready buyer, if you need help, finding a seller or need help getting a buyer for your property, that's where maybe another party comes in and provides that buyer or provides that seller, so you can marry together the motivated seller A to the wholesale buyer C, with you, the wholesaler B, being in between. And if another party brings in that seller or buyer, that's where you put together a joint venture agreement and you agree on some type of split of the wholesale fee. Any questions from me on that? Thought I'd just make sure that you guys know that this is something that you can and should be doing as a part of your wholesaling business, as a part of your direct to seller marketing. You always want to make sure that you monetize as many of the leads and opportunities in your funnel as possible. You're going to have some deals that come through your funnel where you don't necessarily want to fix and flip it, fix and hold it, buy it as a cash flowing rental. You may want to wholesale it. You may not have the buyer there. So it may require doing a joint venture or JV wholesaling deal. Or you may have a buyer that you're working with through your funnel marketing, and you need help in finding a property that meets that buyer's criteria. Okay.